Great. Thanks. Thanks a lot, Robert. I think that's the first time I've ever described as a crackerjack data scientist. I really like that. So
All
that's
true.
great. I'll get started. Share my screen here. All right. So it looks like we are good. So a couple notes before we get started. I think there's been a lot of talk before about the requirements for following along with this workshop. I want to first say that this does require some dependencies that are a little bit finicky to install. So I really apologize for any difficulties people had. At this point, the main way that I was anticipating people would run this would be through a Docker environment, which I set up the resources to create. That does, of course, require that you either have Docker installed on your machine or you install it in preparation for this workshop. So it is a little bit tricky to install at this point. If you haven't already installed it, you're certainly welcome to try right now, but I'm guessing that it will probably take more time than you have, than you'll need before the workshop gets started. So just a reminder that you're welcome to just follow along. I'm going to work through everything, and the repository that has the notebook and the data will remain up. So you're welcome to install the dependencies and run through it. At your own pace later on. If you have Docker installed, but you haven't already built the image, I recommend that you do that right now. The instructions are right here, this Docker compose build command. You might want to do that, and that'll take a few minutes to run. So maybe you can run that while I'm giving a little bit of a spiel and showing some slides, and then you'll be ready to go when we start with the notebook. Also, I just want to say I'm really happy to be here. I think that I first committed to doing this workshop in December of 2019, which if anyone can remember what the world was like back then, the plan was for this to be in person, and we'd all be in a different state of mind. But after a lot of time in limbo, I'm really excited to finally be doing it, even if we can't all be face to face in the same room. But luckily, that does allow for some of the folks that are not in the Philadelphia area to be able to join, which is really great. I am joining from Philadelphia, but I'm really excited that people can be from all around. All right, so I'm going to do a little bit of an overview of some just big picture concepts, and then we'll get into the interactive portion. So this this workshop is on working with satellite imagery and Python. We're going to work with not only satellite imagery. Actually, the imagery that we're working with is drone imagery, but it functions the same way as Robert mentioned. It sort of all under that umbrella of Earth observation. But we're going to work both with imagery and what's called vector data, which is geospatial data that is used to annotate the globe. And we'll sort of learn how those two things work in concert. Go over a couple things. First, I'll tell you a little bit briefly about myself, and then a little bit of background on this Earth observation industry, for lack of a better term, and some of the reasons why you should care about this, being able to do the work that I'm going to get into. And then we'll do the workshop, get into some basics, and a little bit more of an applied section on basically working through the data and showing you how to sort of prepare data for a machine learning project. So basically, I think the objective of this workshop is it's really the work that we're going to do is really quite simple. You don't need to know anything about geospatial data or about satellite imagery or overhead imagery or anything. The objective is just to sort of give you a sense of some of the different tools and how they interact. And then, even though the things that we're learning are pretty trivial, I'm hoping that you can sort of imagine how knowing how to do these things would enable you to sort of expand the possibility of all the things you could do working with geospatial data and imagery. But first, a little bit about me. My name is Simon. I work at Azavea, which you now all know about. It's a really terrific place to work. I'm really fortunate to have found a home there. I've been at Azavea for about 3.5 years. I'm a data scientist. I work on a variety of different projects. Some of them are sort of more traditional statistical models that incorporate geospatial data, and it's about health or housing or all sorts of different things. Some of them are, and then increasingly I've started to work more and more with geospatial imagery, which we as a company have like a really significant investment in. And some of that has been on machine learning projects, which we have developed some software called Raster Vision that is a framework for performing computer vision tasks on large format overhead imagery. And again, I've worked on a number of different projects. So yeah, that's it about me. Again, I'm coming to you from Philadelphia. Before I worked at Azavea, I got a master's degree in city planning, which is where I first learned or sort of got exposure to working with geospatial data, geographic information systems, which is sort of the broad term for working with geospatial data. And that led me to Azavea, and I've been able to really learn a lot and grow on the job at Azavea. So just a little bit about Earth observation data and this sort of industry. I know my little portion of this world. I'm no means an expert in everything in the field, but the basic gist of it is that recently it's become a lot cheaper to put satellites into space, and there's been just like a boom in the amount of imagery that is available for analysis. And then as that's happened, deep learning has had a bit of a boom time, and machine learning. And basically the idea is that like we have all of this imagery that is coming off satellites that is more than humans can comb through all at once. And we're able to develop algorithms that can automatically detect different phenomena within the imagery, and people are just sort of starting to scratch the surface of all of the different possibilities of things that we can do with it. So that's something that we at Azavea are really interested in, and we're trying to figure it out along with everybody else. And we partner with different organizations that are either have imagery or have complicated problems that they want us to try and solve. And it's a lot of what we do. I would direct you to the blog at azavea.com. We've myself and some of my colleagues have written up a lot about our different musings about what's possible and what we've been doing, and sort of what we see as the future of machine learning and geospatial imagery. And along with all of this this data, there's a really robust ecosystem of software, both proprietary and open source, that we, some of which you will learn about today, that we contribute to and are really like interested in advancing the state of the art of. So there's been a lot written on this topic. If you're interested in that, I highly recommend going down a rabbit hole about all that this industry entails. It's really fascinating, but I'll cap it at that for today, and we'll go a little bit smaller bore because if you want to work with, if you want to sort of jump into this field and all of the work that's going on with geospatial data and imagery, it's really important to understand the basics of how to work with it. So that's what we're going to focus on today. But before we get into that, there are a number of different free imagery sources. There are certainly a lot of satellite imagery providers that charge a lot of money for their data, and that's a whole different world. But there are places where if you're interested in what we do here, you can go download data for free, and some of it comes with accompanying labels that you can analyze or start to do computer vision on. There's aerial imagery of the city of Philadelphia on Open DataPhilly, which I'm sure anyone who works with data, in and around Philadelphia is probably familiar with. There's also these couple different really large data sets that include labels of different polygons, like buildings and ships and cars, etc. XView and SpaceNet, and those are run by different organizations and have generally had computer vision competitions associated with them that have really large cash prizes. Those, your mileage may vary on trying to compete with people who are doing the state of the art in machine learning, but they're really important large data sets that you can work with. Landsat is lower resolution satellite imagery, but that's from NASA and the USGS, I believe. And that is another free data source for really large satellite imagery. And then hand in hand with the imagery, we'll learn about like sort of what I'm talking about when I say labels, this geospatial labels. Open DataPhilly has lots of geospatial data about the city of Philadelphia and the region. Even if you're not working with imagery, that's just a good place to start to find some geospatial data that you can work with, even if it's sort of just mapping or the sort of work that we're talking about today. And OpenStreetMap, which is actually where the labels that we're going to work with today come from. And for those of you who aren't familiar, OpenStreetMap is it's an open source free map of the world. It's like the Wikipedia of maps, essentially. So it has data on buildings, roads, etc. It's essentially like a base map of the entire world that people from all over the globe contribute to. Lots of other places. So if you're interested in this, I recommend checking out those links. These slides are up in the repo, so feel free to check them out. All right, so that's that. I'm gonna jump right into the workshop at this point. So for those of you who have got the Docker installed and the repository downloaded, and you've navigated to that workshop, to that directory, I tried to keep this as simple as possible once you had Docker installed. So you should be able to either just run this run script, or use the command that's in the README in the repository, and we should be able to open up this notebook, which is we're gonna hold. This notebook has all of the analysis for the evening. or all of the, just all the work, both some annotation and the actual code that we're going to be running. So this is your one-stop shop for following along with the work. I guess, I might take a moment to pause if anyone has questions. I don't know if Ram, are you planning to monitor questions and just sort of shout them out when they have them, or should I stop periodically to check and see if people have any?
We will keep moderating,
okay.
Simon. And
okay,
I think
cool.
one question here that's coming up, most importantly, is getting to this Jupyter notebook, right? So one thing
Sure.
you might want to just mention about is at the end of the container as to which link they need to do to come up here, because some people are getting no service token, or they're asking for the tokens there. So yeah, if you just point to this link.
Yeah. I would try this this lower one. The lower one is 127.00. Are people having luck opening that one?
I think people are missing that part. So just highlight the part that you need to click on that 127. That's the one.
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure the difference between these two, but hopefully that works for people. I'll give folks a moment to look at this.
And while people are doing that, is Google Earth Engine also a free source for satellite imagery?
Yeah, Google Earth Engine is it's software for processing large imagery at scale. So it's not in and of itself. Its main function is not to be a resource for procuring satellite imagery. Although I do think that there are some of the data sets which I mentioned in the slideshow may be accessible through Google Earth Engine. So that's a project from Google in which you can do some sophisticated parallel processing to process really large data sets on their servers. And that is free. I think there's like a sign up process. I don't have too much familiarity with Google Earth Engine. I have used it, but and I'm not entirely sure where it is as a project right now, but that's definitely something that's worth checking out.
I can pipe up here about that.
Sure.
Google Earth Engine was originally started by Google.org, the philanthropic arm of Google, and was primarily aimed at supporting conservation and environmental type projects, climate change, things like that. It is not a source for raw imagery. They've ingested and processed it and made it, optimized it for doing the kinds of processing you can do in their platform. It's a pretty functional, powerful platform. It has both a JavaScript and a Python API, but it's also non-trivial. There's a lot to learn there. If you're looking for raw data sources for satellite imagery, one of our colleagues, Joe Morrison, wrote a blog about this last year that you could find on our company website. But Amazon Web Services has a pretty great open data repository that has a lot of Earth imagery, Landsat, and as well as the European Union's Sentinel satellites. It's a huge trove of data that, if you're comfortable working in the Amazon environment, is pretty powerful.
Thank you, Robert.
Great. Ron, I'll sort of defer to you when you think if you're seeing the chat and seeing that there's people are starting to get ready to run.
I think you can start. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Otherwise, people will be able to catch up. We don't want to delay you.
Sure thing. Yeah. Great. So again, the objective of this workshop is to really learn the basics of geospatial data, how it's encoded, and how we work with it in Python, or at least some of the tools that are available. This is, I don't claim this is an exhaustive list of all of the tools to work with geospatial data in Python, but they're the ones that I've found to be really useful. So, you know, I scoped this down to make it as sort of simple and easy to use as possible. We're going to work with two really, just like two very small data sets that were, that should be quick and easy to work with. And we're small enough to just upload to GitHub. A portion of a GeoTIFF, which is a large image, essentially, with geospatial information over the city in Uganda, and a Geojson file, which is a geospatial data file that includes labels of buildings over that same area. And those came directly from OpenStreetMap, which, as I said, is the this open, large, publicly editable, open data set of all sorts of information of all around the globe. So, you know, I think that the point is to show you, just get you familiar with a few different tools, and get a sense of like all of their capabilities. And I'm hoping that at the end of it, you will be able to say that you have a sense of the sort of possibilities that are available using these different data structures. And you could extrapolate those to do something, to do any number of things that are much more sophisticated than what we were able to get to today. So that's where I'm trying to get to. And if that's, if you have questions that you think will help enable your understanding of them, please feel free to ask at any point. And I think just in the chat, and Ron will shout those out to me. So some of those tools that specifically that we're going to talk about, Geopandas, for working with vector data, which I will get into the difference between vector and raster data at a basic level. Geopandas, which is built on top of pandas. Anyone who works with data in Python is probably familiar with pandas. It's a library for working with structured data in data frames, and it provides us with these geodata frames, which are allow you to do all of the work that you do in pandas, but also enables you to do geospatial things. And then Geopandas is built on top of a library called Shapely, which is essentially just a library that encodes geometries and basically allows you to perform operations on them, whether it's finding the area of a polygon or interacting that polygon with another polygon or doing all sorts of different things that we're going to get into. And then on the raster side, which includes imagery, you know, the two main tools that we'll be using are GDAL, which stands for Geospatial Data Abstraction Library, which is a low-level library and command line tool for doing a lot of the similar operations with imagery and raster data sets. It's totally indispensable. If you work with imagery, you'll use it every single day. And then Rasterio, which is a Python library that's built on top of GDAL, and essentially just allows you to ingest raster data sources, such as images, into Python, and then convert them into NumPy arrays. That's the other, really the third tool that I could have added to this list. Again, anyone who's familiar with working with data in Python is probably familiar with NumPy, which just allows you to do linear algebra and work with like n-dimensional arrays of numbers, just layers and layers of numbers, which is really just what images are. So we're going to do just sort of like input and output, and then windowed reading and writing. And basically that's just like, how do you read a portion of an image, which is important because these data sets can get really large. And then in the second portion, we're gonna like apply some of the things that we learned in the basics to basically turn this Geojson labels and this GeoTIFF into a format that's like easily digestible by computer vision library. So oftentimes, if you're using an off-the-shelf tool like FastAI, you know, it accepts PNG data, PNG images and like a CSV of like classifications for them or something like that. So basically, like, how do you get from, rather than the way that, you know, geospatial data comes out off of you know, one of these sources. So how do we get from the input to that output? So there are two different files, scene.tiff, that's this aerial image, and buildings.geojson. These are both in the repository. So if you downloaded the whole thing, you will have those. And we're just going to read and write directly from this repo. So before we get going, I'm going to just import some libraries. Again, you have all these in the Docker environment, and then that we'll use throughout the workshop. So I guess the first thing I want to talk about is vector data. So vector data is in the GIS world, it's usually referred to as points, lines, and polygons. So it's essentially just it is like data points that have either you know, area, like a polygon that is like a closed loop of vertices, length, in which it's like a line that has like sort of length but no area, and that would be a line, which is often like how a road is stored as, or a point, which is just like a pair of coordinates. So this screenshot shows you what a polygon looks like in this format called Geojson, which is what we're going to be working with. It's a pretty popular geospatial data format for vector data. And this is from just this like online tool called geojson.io, which allows you to make a polygon, and it shows you what that polygon looks like as a GeoJSON. This is just an example. This is Fairmount, where I live. GeoJSON is really simple. It's human readable. It is a JSON compliant format. So it's essentially just made up of this like type classification and then this list of features. And each of these features is a polygon. Or in this case, it's a polygon. So it's essentially just like a two-dimensional list of vertices that make up the extent of this polygon. And those vertices are represented in this case in longitude and latitude, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with. And that's essentially a tells you exactly where on the Earth's surface this polygon is. That's what it looks like. If we want to look at this is just gives us a look into the buildings.geojson file that we're going to be working with. This is just for those who aren't familiar, you can just run like a bash command in a Jupyter notebook using this exclamation point. So is basically just like showing us the first 30 lines of this buildings.geojson. So one thing you'll notice is that we have these properties here. So this is basically like tabular data that is associated with each of these features. I kept two different categories, the building condition and the material, because we'll work with that later. The other thing you'll notice is that the numbers don't are clearly on a different scale than the than in the geojson.io example. And basically, like what that means is that this is projected data, and it's projected in a specific coordinate system. So basically, that's just this gets into how we represent a three-dimensional surface in a two-dimensional, like on a two-dimensional map. And the key to this is that it's in a unit of measurement that makes sense rather than latitude and longitude. This happens to be projected in meters. So those coordinates actually have some meaning. If you were to measure the distance between those two different points that we see, that's actually a distance in meters. So that will that makes it easier to actually do operations that are that require you to use measurements of distance that makes sense. So we are going to we're just going to start by just reading in this GeoJSON file. Again, this is really simple. It will look familiar if you're used to pandas, but it's just this read file command. So basically, what we get this G is a what's called a Geodata Frame. So this is a pandas data frame. It is it's a like tile class of pandas data frames, and you can do like any pandas data frame thing that you would be able to do on a regular one. For example, like filtering just the buildings that are wood, or you know, anything that you can imagine. There's also like special methods, like the plot method in this case will actually plot all of the buildings, so you can see them visualized. I will also sometimes reference this. You won't have access to this. This is a GIS software called Qgis. This is just in this for this has a lot of different capabilities for analysis, but for our purposes, I'm just going to be using it to visualize things. So this is an example of all of the buildings as these building labels as they exist in the world. And you can just see we've plotted them here. So the thing that makes a Geodata Frame special is this geometry column, which is just a pandas series made up of shapely polygons, which I referenced. So if you look at the first value in the Geopandas geometry column, it gives us this, this is a shapely object, which if you like just return it in a Jupyter notebook, it will plot the boundaries. And you can see this is just made up of coordinate vertices. And this has, the shapely polygons have all sorts of different properties that, you know, like this gives us, this building is 664 square meters. But we just happen to know that this is, that this data set is projected in meters. You could get the centroid, which is like the center point of the building, and you can like apply these methods over the whole data set. So you know, with one line of code, we could go from this geodata frame of all of the buildings in this area to a geodata frame of just the point. So just like two geographic coordinates, or sorry, two projected coordinates of the centers of all those buildings. And that might be useful for something that you're trying to do. All right, so we'll put a pin in that. We're going to use
Simon.
Yeah, sure.
Before you move on to the next part, there are a couple of questions related to
Sure.
what you're discussing. So regarding the coordinate system here that you were
Yeah.
referring to for the projections and all that. So where is the origin for that? Where's the coordinate origin?
Like you mean like where is 0, 0 in this
Yeah.
case?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just in a specific like I don't know off the top of my head. Like, so this is you can see the like with the reference system for this. So like yeah, so this is a specific coordinate system. It's EPSG 32636. So like this is like these are like UTM zones. So you could, oops. You know, this information just like is stored somewhere. So yeah, I guess like maybe the origin point, I think we do. Okay, it looks like it's like right here in right in the middle of the Republic of Congo. So it's specific to this specific projection, which like we have determined is most appropriate for the area that we're working in. So essentially, like you have to just basically because like there's no like obvious projection, like you have to choose the projection that makes the most sense because all of them are doing they're imperfect because, as I said, you're trying to represent a 3D surface in 2 dimensions. So you're basically trying to choose the one that minimizes error the most. And depending on which projection you're using, it'll have a different origin point. Does that make sense?
Okay, so that segues, I think you almost answered that question. The next question is there a concept of a universal coordinate system, or are there different coordinate systems to be aware of?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, there are the geographic coordinate systems, which is like long lat, like we see up here. And this is useful for doing, what we see up here. And that's useful for like placing a point on like in anywhere in the world. Like that applies to the whole world, but it doesn't make sense in terms of measuring distance and such because it's not in an interpretable unit. So sorry, I'm taking a long answer to this. Basically, there are some like universal coordinate systems that are good for doing specific things, like displaying a web map. Like there's something called Web Mercator. But if you are doing like sort of measurement and analysis, it probably makes more sense to use a coordinate system that's specific to the location that you're working in.
Okay. So does this mean that there is always, like, based on the region of the world that you're working in, you could find different coordinate systems, and that's what you would use for your projection. So you can choose that in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Like this UTM zone, it spans the whole globe. So like there's a different zone for different parts of the globe. So yeah, I mean, this is a really big topic. Like you could there are I'm not sure, hundreds, thousands. There are lots of projections that you could use for various purposes, and then people have that have different requirements. But you know, I don't want to go down too much of a rabbit hole because it does. But you know, the good thing to know about this is like this is useful because it's projected in a unit that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right, great. So that's vector data, which I think is like fairly easy to understand. Raster data is a little bit more, a little harder to maybe wrap your head around, but it's essentially just like made up of, it's like breaking the Earth down into a grid, and then assigning a value to each pixel in that, or each square in that grid. So, you know, the size of the grid cell can vary based on your data set. But essentially it's like a continuous surface of values rather than discrete points like you see with vector data. So an image is an example of that raster data because it is it's a continuous surface of values, right? And that we can see that by looking at this using GDAL, this library that I told you about, by looking at the image that we're working with. I think earlier on I said the file we were using is scene.tiff. I think I changed the name to image. So disregard scene. Image.tiff is the image that we're working with. So basically this this GDAL info command just returns a bunch of information, summary information about the image that we're working with. And just so for reference, this is the image. It shows just a portion of this city, and it's pretty familiar looking. It's an RGB image. So basically, what that means is that it is made up of 3 different bands, just red, green, and blue, that all have values between 0 and 255, and those 3 bands represent like are stacked on top of each other, and for each pixel in this this grid of pixels that make up the image, there are 3 different values that represent a specific color. So this is how all you know, this is just how images work. It would be similar if you just read in a normal PNG image that you pulled off of Google. But this GDAL info command gives us a lot of different information that we can sort of work through. So basically, we're seeing that this image is 6,000 by 6,000. That is the size of the image in pixels. We also see some information about the projection, which we just talked about. Both of these, the image and the labels, are projected in the same coordinate system, which I made sure was the case to keep things simple. But it's important to note that if you want to allow these data sets to talk to each other, they need to be in the same coordinate system. That is not particularly difficult to convert one data set from one coordinate system to another. You just need to know what data set it's, you know, what is like the sort of encoding of the data set that it's coming from, and what is the encoding of the data set that it's going to. We're not gonna have to worry about that right now because they are in the same coordinate system. But you know, this gives you a lot of information. Pixel size. So this is the like actual size in the projected unit of each individual pixel. So this is 0.03 times a meter. It comes down to like a couple, I think like 4 centimeter resolution. And that just tells you like literally just this one block of color. We go in, like this is a pixel. This is 4 centimeters, right? So that gives you a sense of, that's the resolution of the image. Yeah, so that's a lot of information. You'll see that there's a 4th band, and that's just, this is the alpha band, And this just, you'll see when we print out the data that that just tells us like that determines which pixels are no data, which is a classification that essentially like this is not part of the image because these grids are rectangular, but the area that we're looking at is not necessarily all covered by the image. We don't need to get too much into this because I've cropped the image to a specific square. There isn't actually any no data in there, but that's just something to know about. Okay.
Simon, I have one question here for you. Based on all the details that you were showing that was being pulled out from that particular image, right? In the top, like that is specific to Uganda itself. So does this mean that the image has to have been tagged in some way? Does it need to have some metadata or tagged, or it can be on any TIFF image or?
Yeah. The geospatial, the information is like built into the file. I think is that what you mean? Like the we could erase this geospatial image from the metadata, and it would just be it would cease to be a geotiff. It would just be an image, and that would be the case if we just converted this into like a regular PNG. You'd lose all of this metadata, and it would just be like a large PNG that doesn't know where it is in the world. But that's what makes this geotiff geotiff, right? Is that it does have this geospatial information attached to it. So yeah, it is built into the file.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure. All right, so we're going to use this library called Rasterio to read in the images and store them in memory as NumPy arrays. So this is how the syntax works. Rasterio.open. This is a dataset reader object, and that src.read returns the NumPy array. So if we look at this, this is going to take a moment. That's all it is. That once we read it in, it's just a NumPy array. So you can see it's 4 bands by 6,000 by 6,000. So at this point, you can sort of I think it might be coming to focus that if you know how to work with NumPy and you understand all of the sophisticated math that you can do with it, you can do all of that on top of with images, that might not, you might be thinking like, well, what is multiplying an image times an image? That doesn't make any sense. But there are all these different algorithms that allow you to do band math on the different images to sort of pull out to classify water or classify vegetation or do any sort of analysis that you would find interesting. So that's kind of the core of how you work with these images in Python. So you can see this is the max value among this whole image is 255. Again, the values span from 0 to 255, and then we can use this this matplotlib function to plot the image in the Jupyter notebook. So I guess this is flipped because I transposed it, but it's basically just plotting it on a Cartesian plane. The 6,000 by 6,000. It's just it just naturally, this function knows how to plot a 3-band image. So you can look at it. So that was easy, right? But you saw that it took not that long, but it took a moment to read in that image. And this is just a really small portion of an image that wasn't even that large. So, in the wild, these things, like these images can, be tens of gigabytes. And it cannot be, sometimes not practical to try to read the whole image into memory. So that's where this concept of like windowed reading and writing comes in. And that's gonna be pretty key to what we're gonna work on today. So basically when we say like read a window of the image, we're just gonna say, all right, instead of reading the whole thing, just grab, a 1000 by 1000 swatch from right here. And let's just like look at that, or, let's do some analysis on that. So to do that, you need, we're gonna work on that right now. So basically, you do the same sort of functionality where you, here we're gonna open up the image and get some information about it. The width, the height, we happen to know these, but I'm just gonna store them as variables. We know the width and the height are, I think that's a typo there, are each 6,000, that's a typo too, are each 6,000 pixels. I'm gonna just fix that. So the objective of this, and then this profile object, this P, just stores like a bunch of information about the information. This is essentially like all of the geospatial information that makes it not just a NumPy array. And right here, we're going to do a little bit of math to find right, this is what we're trying to do, yeah. So we're trying to find, the goal of this is to just find, is to take the 1000 by 1000 square that is at the very center of this image. So you can sort of see how this works, right? We take the width of the image. This, incidentally, because this is a square, both of these values will be the same, but we're taking the width of this image divided by 2. That gives us the center point, the center column in this raster grid, and then subtracting, shifting that column over by half of the size of this window that we want. So it's going to be, sort of straddling the center of the image, both horizontally and vertically. So that's why we get these values, which are just, are going to be 2,500, right? So just smack dab in the middle. And the other thing that we need to do is update the geospatial information, right? Because this, right now, this like profile understands the image to be where it is in the world, which is spanning over all 6,000 of these pixels. But like, we want to write off a geotiff that has updated geospatial information. So we want it to know that it's just in the middle of this image. And we use this, we do that by updating this transform object. But first we need to define the window. And the window is essentially like, is this Rasterio object that basically specifies like where in the image we want to read from. So first off, we're gonna, so basically we're gonna open the image at the specific window that we've specified. So essentially, this is just saying, oh, okay. So before we do that, we're going to open the image and then define the define the transformation that will essentially give us the geospatial information associated with just the middle box that we're trying to take. We're going to define that. We're going to store that as X. So essentially, this is this this Python object that just knows how to convert the geospatial information, which is, again, is like, where is this thing on Earth, from this thing is at the bounding box of this 6,000 by 6,000 image to this thing occupies just the bounding box of the 1,000 by 1,000 image at the middle. So we're going to put it all together. We're going to read in this small portion of the image, which again, this variable f will be a 1,000 by 1,000 band image. And then we update this profile object, which is basically saying like, okay, you used to think that you were a 6,000 by 6,000 image that occupied this large space in Kampala. You know, now like understand that you are a 1,000 by 1,000 image that occupies a different specific geospatial location. And then we can, specify this profile, which says like, okay, now understand that you're in a different place, and then write off the smaller image. So if we write that off, you'll see that this sample.tiff, we just save that as a geotiff just right in this directory that we're working with. And if we go back to, we could see, you can see how it has essentially, it's just saved just this little portion that we want to work with. And now we can do stuff with it. So that is, the basics of windowed reading and writing. So we're going to build on all those things in the next section, but I guess I will take a pause. I know I went through a bunch of stuff and see if there are any questions.
There's one question here I see. What does each number in P transform mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't, I've like never really committed that to, I've never really learned that. I assume that it's, yeah, I actually don't really know. I've never really like needed to figure out what each number corresponds to, but I assume that it's just like some sort of offset math. Again, this is just like a specific like Python object that just like it stores the information that you need to know. But I guess this is the pixel size, and then yeah, it's probably like offset from origin in some way. But yeah, I've never needed to know that.
Those are all the questions for now. There were a couple others, but Robert took some time to answer in the chat. Oh,
cool. Great. Glad to hear it. All right, great. Yeah, just keep them coming if you have more. All right, so like I said, we're gonna use some of this stuff to just complete a couple pretty basic tasks. The first one we're going to work on is just like prepping some data for building chip classification. So if you can think of this, one of the three big computer vision tasks that we do is chip classification. So that's essentially where we break break an image into a grid and train a model to identify whether or not a specific object, there's a specific object present in that grid, in that chip or grid cell. So in this case, we are going to prepare for a computer vision task in which you want to identify which portions of our image include buildings. You know, if you remember, buildings are not, you know, there's some of the image has buildings in it and some of it doesn't. So you essentially be doing like a building detector that gives you the general location of buildings, if not the specific outline, or it doesn't return a bounding box the way an object detection problem would. So let's think about what we need to do for that. You know, I know like a pretty simple way that a computer vision library might want that is basically like two different, you know, it probably expects PNG images of a certain size. So just basically like the type of image you would download from Google, or you'd get in a like basic computer vision, you know, training data set for like a simple problem. So we need to go through and break up this large image into a bunch of really small PNGs and use the building label data set to identify which particular locations have a building covering a portion of the image and which don't, and then filter those images into two different folders. So the way that we're going to do that, first we're going to read in the buildings file. This is the same Geodata frame that we were working with before. And then, oh yeah, the first thing we need to do is you'll note that the buildings cover a much larger extent than the image. So the first thing we're going to do is basically clip this buildings data set to the extent of the image that we're interested in. And yeah, that's a pretty basic GIS operation. You could think of it essentially as just like a cookie cutter that you're putting down on top of the buildings file and extracting only the ones we're interested in. But to do that, we need to know like how do we define the area that we're interested in? And to do that, we need to find the bounding box of the image. So the bounding box, this is another bit of data that's stored in the image, and we can open it from this dataset reader. So we can see this bounding box. This, I assume this probably makes sense to you. Like the leftmost coordinate is, you know, 45, 9, 286, bottom 27, 87, 1, etc. And you could create a polygon from that using, by just combining the different vertices. It's just like a pretty basic, you can just think of like a square and a Cartesian plot. But we'll extract this, this object into the different coordinates for left, bottom, right, and top. And now we're going to use those coordinates to create a shapely polygon to do some of the geospatial operations that we were talking about before. So you can see this is how you construct, one of the ways you construct this shapely polygon objects, which is just a set of coordinates, left, bottom, left, top. So you're essentially just right top, right bottom. So you're essentially just tracing around the outside of the box. And what that gives you is this shapely object. And now we are going to take this shapely object and turn this into a Geodata frame. So what we get here is, you know, it's the same class as the B-box is the buildings Geodata frame, but it only has, it just has like one row and it has no attributes other than just the geometry. It's just a shapely geometry forced into a Geodata frame, so it's easier for it to talk to the buildings. And then you can see what that looks like, plotted the same way. And that's, again, that's the all buildings. And then we can use this. This gets into like, these are some of the like special Geopandas things that differentiate a Geodata frame from a normal Pandas data frame. And this is just like this overlay function that does this cookie cutter operation that I was telling you about. So now this basically finds the intersection of all of the buildings and the bounding box. So it's basically like it's just like the place where both of those like data sets exist. So now you can see the buildings. Oh, if you plot it, see, it's just now it's like just the buildings that are present in this bounding box. So right here, we're going to create like a file structure that has like buildings true and false. So I just added this in to just remove an existing file structure if you'd already run through this notebook. So basically this like will remove the buildings directory if it already exists, and then make this structure that is like has a buildings folder and then a true folder and a false folder. We're gonna do that, and then we're gonna take all of these buildings, and like we're not interested, for the purposes of this task, we're not interested in like each of the individual buildings. We don't need to save each PNG off with like the name of the building. We just want to know whether any building intersects with that specific chip. So we're going to convert all of these buildings into one, all of these individual polygons that you see right here into one multi-polygon, which is another shapely object that just contains like a bunch of polygons. So that you just take the series and cast that as a multi-polygon. If you look at that, you'll see it's just like, I guess it plots it in a different color, but it's essentially the same. It has all of the same, for the most part, the same properties as the polygon. And then we are eventually going to iterate over the different, iterate over the image in specific windows. But right here, I'm just going to specify the PNG size. So let's just say for whatever reason, whether it's like what you've determined to be the right size for your task, or it's like the computation, the like image size that the library they're using expects, we're going to specify that as 600. And for our purposes, that's nice because it fits neatly into 6,000. So these PNGs that we're creating are going to be 600 by 600. And so if you do 6,000 by 6,000, they're going to be 100 of them, right? Because it's going to be like a 10 by 10. There's 600, you'll fit 10 chips across the image, across a 6,000 pixel image. So basically, like right now, what we're going to do is go through and, just sort of basically go over the image 600 pixels at a time, read in each portion, and then I'll run it here because it'll take a second, and then we can sort of talk through it as we go. So basically, so we're opening up the image. We are finding the width and height, which again are both 6,000. And then we're just gonna like iterate over that grid, both over the width and the height and read and write one a chip or sort of section of the image at a time. So this is, you'll remember this from the previous section. We're going to construct a window that at the beginning will start at 0, 0, and then be and be like 600 pixels tall and 600 pixels wide. But then the next time around will be at 0, 600, and then span for the next 600 pixels. And then we are going to find the corresponding spatial coordinates, because we need to know like where in the world this chip is, so that we can compare it to the building's polygon and determine whether or not it is covered by buildings. So to do that, we need this transform that we talked about. Then we need to read in this portion of the image as a NumPy array. So this NumPy array, eventually we're going to save off as a PNG, but first we need to do that analysis to determine whether or not it overlaps with buildings. So to do that, we're going to do the transformation that we're familiar with from before, and get the bounding box of this specific chip. You'll see here that we have to open a temporary geotiff, even though we're not going to write to it, just to find the bounds. This is I did some digging on this. It's like a weird limitation of Rasterio that you can't just get the bounding coordinates directly from the transform, but this is just like a workaround for now. And then we will use this same this polygon function. This is a different way of constructing a polygon from bounding coordinates. I think it just needs the coordinates be in a different sequence than when you get them from Geopandas. But essentially all you need to know is that we've gathered the information about where this chip is, we've created another polygon, and now we have two different shapely polygons that can talk to each other. So we'll use this intersects method to check whether the bounding box of the chip intersects with the multi-polygon, which includes all of the buildings, and specify that as this has building variable, and then use that to specify the label, which is going to determine whether or not the building has, or whether or not this image should be put into the buildings true folder, or the buildings false folder. So so we use that to construct the file path, and then we're going to use this library pill to save off the image. Now we're going to save this off without any spatial information, because that's what the deep learning library wants. It doesn't care about, it just wants PNGs. All that we need to know is whether or not it intersects with buildings. So we're just going to save off each of these images to their appropriate locations. And then I just gave them a file name that corresponds to where they are in the grid cell, in the the width and the height of the starting point. So then what we have is
Simon, I think we have a question here.
Sure, yeah, fire away.
Yeah, so it's about the bounding box.
Sure.
Is it, what do you do when the bounding box is given in the UTM coordinates?
When the bounding box, yeah, I mean, that's, in this case, the bounding box being given in the UTM coordinates is exactly what we want. Because all that matters is that it has to match with the building labels, which are also in the UTM coordinates, right? So at that point, it's like, it's abstracted from, you know, all that really matters is that they're like speaking the same language, you know, because if it says like, I'm in this place in the UTM projection, then it just has to match with the buildings, right? So that's what I mean when I say like where it is in the globe. It's just like in a language that the other data set understands. Is that what I'm saying?
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think this may be the same thing about saying, so this would be, I think from one of the people, again, your image.tf and the building Geojson should have the same projection system.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's exactly right. They always need to have the same projection system. Or you could do something where you reproject them on the fly if that wasn't possible, but you know, that's just getting into like sort of how you structure your workflow. But now you can see what we have if we just look at these folders. You know, we essentially have broken it down. All of these images do not have buildings, and the images that are in the true folder do. So we could, you know, take a look at that. This is the first or the second option from the buildings false. So we can say this chip clearly doesn't have a building in it, and this is should be class. This should have a building in it, which it does. So now you could feed these into machine learning. Like you could train a model on this that just these are like appropriate labels. Now you know which ones have buildings and which doesn't. So it could then identify which parts of the image do and don't have do and don't have buildings in it, and then cobble them back together. And that's the sort of like converting that machine learning process to geospatial imagery is what we're sort of doing manually here, but also what our library Raster Vision, which I've mentioned a couple of times, that's really what it does. That's the real value out of it. So so that's one example. The second case that we're going to consider is if you wanted to do like a semantic segmentation task, which is another computer vision task, and that is different in that with that in that case we wouldn't just be interested in specifying like whether or not this chip has a building in it. We want to know at a pixel by pixel level whether or not this is building or not. So that is that's a different task and takes a different different input. And so specifically what we need to do is to create a raster surface that contains the ground truth labels of where the buildings are and where they aren't. So this gets into like how we think of like raster surfaces are not necessarily just images, although images are one type of them. They really can contain any arbitrary characteristic. A common one you see often is like land use classification. So you'll have a map of a certain area, and each area has a value tied to it. Like each pixel has a value that corresponds to a specific land use, like you know, woodlands or concrete, impervious, etc. And so that's like a categorical value that's just encoded with an integer. And that's essentially what we want to do here. At the end of it, we want to have an image that has actually, in the case that we're going to do 0 values for like 0, 1, and 2, which is building condition is good, building condition bad, I think, or sort of unsatisfactory, and then no building. And I'll show you how we do that. But that's the end goal. And just because we can, we're going to do that for just like a portion of the image again. But first, before we get into that, I have a function here. This just repeats a snippet of code from up here, which is just that workaround that I was talking about. This function just takes it takes the dataset reader, which is essentially like the interface to the GeoTIFF and the window that we're interested in, and returns the bounding box as a shapely polygon. So we were familiar with this code already. We're going to use that later. So I guess, yeah, so in this case, we're going to want to rasterize. That's what this process is called, this process of like burning values into a raster file at the specific locations of like where that like correspond to the values in a vector file. We're going to rasterize just like a 1000 by 1000 section right at the top right corner of, or top left corner of the image. So again, you know, I think at this point, you're familiar enough to see like how this window corresponds to the like that top left corner of the image. It's starting at like origin, like the offset for the rows and columns is both 0, and then it's going to extend 1,000 pixels up and 1,000 pixels to the right and 1,000 pixels down. So first we're going to read in that portion of the image as a NumPy array. And then we're going to use this function to find the bounding box of this section of the image as a shapely polygon. And we're going to also grab this transformation, which again gives us, allows us to update the geospatial information from the whole image to just the small portion.
So Simon, one
Sure.
more question. So
Sure.
this building data that you have, was it pre-processed and labeled beforehand?
Yes. Well, the building data came from OpenStreetMap.
Okay.
So it's extracted as part of this competition. And yeah, I did some basic, I cleaned up some names, like variable names and stuff. But yeah, it just, it's straight out of OpenStreetMap.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So again, like to create this raster, we need to know like which, we need to extract just the buildings that we want to burn into the raster file. And we're going to do that familiar operation in which we clip one, clip like a geodata frame to a specific polygon. And actually, I showed you like kind of a more cumbersome way to do it above, just because I thought it'd be useful to understand how you could basically turn a shapely polygon into a geodata frame. But this is actually an easier way to do it. This Geopandas Clip function, which essentially this, rather than needing two different Geopandas geodata frames, it can take just a geodata frame and a shapely polygon, which again, just keep in mind that like, this is all, there's not like, these are related, right? Because Geopandas geodata frame is just the thing that makes it a geodata frame is just a bunch of shapely polygons. So there's not a whole lot of abstraction there. So
Simon, one more question. Sorry
Sure.
to interrupt you right there.
No problem.
Because we are trying to follow you through, like running it on our own set to on our own notebook here.
Sure.
These buildings that you have here, right? It goes back to a specific cell And I just wanted to check your gpd.overlay. It is a little higher above.
Sure, yeah.
And it's not, I don't know if anybody else is having problems, but when I'm running it, it is not working, the GPD dot, yeah.
This line?
Yeah, it gives the problem about spatial indexes required either R-tree or the PyGeos.
And you're running it in the Docker environment?
Yep, in the Docker environment. And I don't want to take time away from you, but if that was a very quick fix, so we could follow along and do the rest of it.
Little. I'm kind of. It's possible that. Rob, is this? Have you updated? Like, did you build the Docker environment like several days ago?
Yeah.
I think I might have actually updated it since then.
Okay, then fine. Then let's not take time away from you.
Yeah. So if that's happening, I would, if you built it a couple days ago, I tried not to do this, but I did add a couple things to the Docker environment. So if you just rerun the build script, that should fix it.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. Okay.
Yeah. So where were we? Yeah, so this clip is just like another way to do this. We're going to do this like cookie cutter operation to extract just the buildings that we're interested in that overlap with the bounding box of the window that we want to work with. So that does the same thing. Whoops. So you can see this is it. This is just the small portion of the image. These are the buildings. So if we look at these, buildings, we could see that there's actually a variety in the condition that we're working with. So let's say this, a basic example of this task might be to predict whether or not there is a building in this in each individual pixel. But let's say it's like we want to do something a little more sophisticated, where we want to classify the condition of the building based on the image. Now, this may or may not be possible from the image because the condition may or may not be, there might be enough nuance in that. It may just be something that you can't see from above. But let's just say that's something that we want to experiment with. So what we need to do is like burn that specific value into the raster data set. You can't use like a string value. So we want to specify another column that just like uses integer values to correspond to each individual condition. So then we can do like a familiar pandas operation here that just allows us to create a new variable, and we're going to use this variable as the value that specifies like good versus poor, that we will like feed into our machine learning library in the encoding of values. So the way that what we're going to do to output this this final raster is to use this Rasterio function called rasterize, which does this process that that I've been talking about. So I just will show you how we just build up some of these parameters. So what this function accepts, the first thing is the shapes, which is like it's a iterable, like a list or a just something you can iterate over that includes tuples of pairs of the geometry. So like the shape of the building and the value that you want to burn into the raster. So I'll just do, some, I'll just sort of show you how we do that. These, actually, I think these functions are not actually relevant. I wrote these before I realized that we didn't need them, but you just see where we build up the shapes here. So we're essentially just combining this is another thing that's familiar from pandas, where you just like combine two different series, or I guess this isn't even necessarily pandas specific, but like we're just creating a list of tuples that's a combination of a building geometry and the condition value that corresponds to it. So each one is, this is the boundary of a building and the condition 2, which is the value that corresponds to a good condition building. And then we, the second thing we pass in is this, the shape of the array, that we're going to write off as a raster. So basically, like, you keep in mind that this, like, turning the buildings into a grid, it doesn't have any like inherent understanding of like the resolution. You could make, there's no limit on how fine you want you could make the resolution to be, because these lines have no width, but we want the resolution to match the image. So it needs to understand, like, okay, how big, like, what should the resolution of the array that we're rasterizing into be? So we want that to match the image, the section of the image that we read in. So that's 1,000 by 1,000. And then this fill value is the value that we want to fill all parts of the window that don't have a building on top of it. So we're going to specify that to be 0. The transform is what is going to, it's going to allow us to convert the geospatial information to match the specific window that we're looking at. And so I should actually run these. This is just the data type. We want it to match the image as well. And then we can run this function with all of the different parameters. Oh, did I not? That's, oh, whoops, I didn't run that. So that returns another NumPy array, which now has the values burned into it. So you can see, I just found this center of the image. You can see this gives a little summary, but she's like, this is showing different portions of the image that have no building, have a building in poor condition, a building in good condition, and that's like the sort of the edge of the building that is in good condition bordering on the area that has no building. So we can look at that. So again, like the difference between this and the image is that this is only one band. It's not 3 different values that combined to return a color. It's just showing the labels as a flat single band raster. But if we could still look at it, and here I think it just chooses these colors arbitrarily. The plotting library does, but we have the different places. If you were to zoom in, you'd see this is like a raster grid of pixels, and the different values are represented by different colors. So if we look at the image to match it, you could see how it lines up, right? These buildings with the red roofs are the buildings that are in good condition. This one right here with the gray roof is in poor condition, and then everything else is non-building area. So then, you could just write that off as a geotiff or as a PNG, depending. I didn't go through that step because we've sort of already learned how to do that. We're getting short on time. I can briefly show, I'll briefly just show this final little step. This just shows how you could do the same operation just using a GDAL command. But before we do that, we would need to take the buildings that we're interested in rasterizing, which is again, we've specified those buildings that like overlap with the small window. And also importantly, we've added the numeric condition column. So we're just going to save that geodata frame. And this is how you save off a geodata frame to a Geojson or another spatial file type that a software like this QGIS that I'm using can ingest. We're going to save that off as rasterized buildings.geojson. So the buildings that we're hoping to rasterize. So you can see, if we bring that in, you'll see it's just the buildings that we're interested in that just cover this specific location. And then this just shows how you can do this with a GDAL command from the command line. So this is going to do exactly the same thing. It's essentially passing the same information. It's saying, but it does a lot of the, it's doing a lot of the work for you because it automatically reads in the spatial information and converts it. So this is basically saying like, rasterize this GeoJSON file at this 1000 by 1000 resolution, use this condition num variable, know that it's in this specific UTM zone, and then write it out to this building raster.tiff file. So to do that, it gives you this little progress bar. And then you can see right here that this is, you now have this raster file that's just represented as zeros, ones, and twos. So now you can put this into, and again, this is pixels, right? This is not the vector label as we see it before it's rasterized. So this is now in a format that you could use for a semantic segmentation task like I described before. Yeah, and then I guess, I ended up writing off the thing from a step before. But yeah, you could see, sorry, so this is just, so this is just reading in the output of that file, and you can see that it matches up with this one. So that's it for the workshop. I think I've got a little more time. I think we had said we're going to go till 8, so I'm happy to answer any more questions that folks have. But otherwise, I really hope that this was informative for people.
Thank you very much, Simon. This was really good and helpful. So if anybody has any other questions, you could unmute and you could ask Simon directly if you want.